He called it overreacting. I called it divorce. My comeback story. Before we continue, please like and subscribe. Act 1, The Shattered Illusion. My name's Serena. And I'm an artist. Okay, maybe artist is a bit of a stretch. Let's just say, I've mastered the art of making a hot mess with watercolors on old receipts, usually when the kids aren't looking. Not exactly what you'd call a gallery-worthy masterpiece, but hey, it keeps me busy, and my hands colorful. I met Donovan during one of those whirlwind romances that feels straight out of a rom-com, only without the cute-meet-cute or the Hollywood ending. He was the kind of guy who swept you off your feet, charming, funny, spontaneous. He'd say things like, "You're so different from everyone else," and I'd blush, thinking I'd hit the jackpot. He adored my quirks, my passion for painting, and let's be real, he adored my entire existence. At least, that's what I thought. But then there was Eva. Eva. The best friend who just happened to be in every chapter of Donovan's life, even the parts he promised me would be ours alone. Don't get me wrong, I understand friendships, I do. But I'm pretty sure there's a line between best friend and emotionally unavailable baggage that doesn't leave. And Eva was the baggage that never got checked at the door. Donovan swore it was all innocent. Serena, she's just always been there for me. Always. There. For him? Oh really? Well, if there for him means showing up uninvited to every event we had, then sure, I guess that's fine. But I had my suspicions. When you're married to someone who's always there for someone else, you start to feel like the extra in your own movie. Still, I told myself to be understanding. Maybe I was just being paranoid. Who needs to feel loved equally in a relationship anyway? It's not like that's the bare minimum, or anything, right? Then came the trip. A family getaway to Crystal Bay, a perfect day. The kind of day you see on postcards with those little heart-shaped clouds, and everything is supposed to be sunshine and joy. But of course, I was the one who found out the truth the hard way. We were standing on the shore, basking in the glory of what was supposed to be a perfect family moment. And then, out of nowhere, bam, a wave, like it was angry at the universe or something, came crashing toward us. Now, I'm not exactly a professional swimmer, but I can handle the occasional dip in the ocean. Eva though? Not so much. She's the type who screams at the first sign of water near her feet. So what happens? The wave knocks us both into the water, and I'm there, gasping for air, struggling to keep my head above water, and of course, who does Donovan save first? Eva. Let that sink in. I'm flailing in the surf, alone, and the man I married is busy pulling Eva to safety like she's the one in mortal peril. I'm the one with water in my lungs, sand in my hair, and a cut on my leg that stings more out of humiliation than anything else. But Donovan? Oh, he's giving Eva the full treatment, the hand on her back, the "are you okay?" speech, the whole dramatic rescue scene. As for me, I somehow made it to shore, only to be met with a quick pat on the back from Donovan, like I'd just stubbed my toe instead of nearly drowning. It wasn't just the physical pain of the incident that hit me, it was the emotional wrecking ball. He chose her. He always chose her. And I realized, right then and there, that I'd been playing the role of supporting character in our marriage while Eva got to be the lead. I was done. The words flew out of my mouth before I could even stop them. I want a divorce. Donovan, blinking like a confused deer caught in headlights, stared at me for a long, awkward moment. "You're overreacting, Serena," he said, in that tone that made my blood pressure spike. "It's just Eva. You know how she is. Just Eva. Just Eva. The woman who could do no wrong in his eyes. Sure, no big deal. Just the woman who had my place, my attention, my life, and apparently my husband's heart too. I wasn't just overreacting, I was waking up. But the real kicker, the final straw came a week later when I caught him, catching her. He was sneaking around behind my back, meeting up with Eva, and I caught them red-handed. I couldn't even look at him without feeling sick. And then there was Ethan, our son, who had somehow started mimicking Donovan's cold, distant attitude toward me. It was like I had two people in my life, who were slowly turning into strangers. It was clear, they were forming their own little toxic club, and I wasn't invited. So, I packed up my things, took a deep breath, and signed the divorce papers. Ethan stayed with his father, of course, because why would he want to stay with the woman who'd overreacted to every little thing? It was easier for him to stay in the bubble Donovan created, where the world revolved around their little club. Eva as the queen bee, Donovan as her loyal subject, and me? Well, I was just the moth flying too close to the flame. No one wants to stay in a club where they're not wanted. So I left. And just like that, I was free. Act 2, Breaking Free. I landed in Seashell Point with no plan, other than to run, hide, and, in the process, maybe find myself again. Though I wasn't sure who exactly that me was anymore. The town itself was a picture of serenity, all soft sand, coastal breezes, and that sort of quiet that settles into your bones and makes you feel like time slows down. You know the kind, like you're in a place where everything happens at a gentler pace, where no one cares that your life just exploded in slow motion. But let me tell you, I wasn't ready for quiet. I was used to noise, drama, the endless low hum of life with Donovan, the good, the bad, and of course, Eva. The constant sound of his voice, her voice, Ethan's questions. Now, all of a sudden, I was in a town where the biggest disturbance was a seagull fighting with a crab over a French fry period. At first, I couldn't handle the silence. It felt like the world was waiting for me to do something. And what was I supposed to do? Paint? Who was I kidding? I hadn't picked up a brush in years. But in that rare moment of inexplicable bravery, maybe fueled by too much wine or too many days spent in my pajamas, I finally went for it. I bought a sketch pad, a set of brushes, and paints. Nothing too fancy. Just the basics, the way an artist starts when they've forgotten who they are. It was that simple act of dipping the brush into the paint that felt like a quiet rebellion. Each stroke felt like a small triumph, like I was slowly carving out a space for myself again. I had forgotten how alive I could feel when I was creating something, when it was just me and the canvas. No one else demanding my attention or affection. No judgment. No ex-husbands hovering around. No Eva looming like an overhanging cloud. Just me, my art, and, yes, I'm not ashamed to admit it, an unhealthy amount of wine. The bottle didn't judge me, and for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like I was disappointing anyone. It was just me, the ocean breeze slipping through the open window, and my paints. I was starting to feel free, like actually free. But even in a town like Seashell Point, it's hard to escape the internet. It doesn't matter how far you run, or how much you change if you're online, your past can follow you anywhere. So, in a moment of overzealous optimism, or maybe desperation, I started a live stream to share my process. You know, because in this weird modern world, even solitude comes with an audience. I didn't know who would show up, but I figured maybe, just maybe, someone might care about my work. Or, at the very least, I might care enough to show up for myself. Enter Sky Shade and Sunchild. They started popping up in my live stream comments almost immediately, two usernames that felt oddly familiar. At first, I didn't think much of it. I was just happy to have anyone watching, anyone commenting, even if it was just a great job, or a love this. But soon, their messages started to get more personal, more intimate. This reminds me of the time we went to that art fair. You were wearing that red scarf, remember? Sky Shade wrote one evening. As I was working on a new painting of the beach at sunset, that's when it hit me. No one outside my immediate circle should know about my old red scarf. No one should remember the time Donovan had taken me to that art fair. I hadn't even told anyone about that event in years. The details were too personal. I paused, looked at the screen. Then the uncomfortable realization crawled up my spine. I had to know. So I did what anyone would do when they find themselves in the digital age of online stalking. I googled them. And I found them. Sky Shade was linked to Donovan's email address, and Sunchild. Well, let's just say that the address I found wasn't exactly a coincidence. It led straight to Ethan's old school. I'd know that zip code anywhere. That's the place where I'd dropped him off for years before all of this, before the betrayal, before the divorce. It was Donovan and Ethan. They had come to haunt me from the digital graveyard of my past. I wasn't sure if this was some weird way for them to win me back, like some low-stakes attempt to use the power of the internet to worm their way back into my life, or if they were simply getting some strange kind of therapy by watching me, waiting for me to crumble. I couldn't decide. All I knew was that I wasn't going to let it happen. I wasn't going to let them back in. No matter how many fake names they used, or how many cute emojis they threw into their comments. It wasn't just the invasion of my privacy that got under my skin, it was the nerve of it all. There they were, living their comfortable little lives while I was in this coastal town, trying to scrape together a new version of myself. And here they were, still fishing for my attention, still trying to draw me back into their toxic world like a moth to a flame. I felt the familiar old panic rise in me, the feeling that if I didn't respond, if I didn't make everything right, they might think I was giving up. But then I caught myself. I wasn't going back. I wasn't about to shrink into the same old Serena, who sat quietly in the background, waiting for love that never came. Not anymore. So I did what any woman reclaiming her life does. I ignored them. And I painted. The only voices I listened to now were the ones in my head, the ones urging me to finally be the person I was meant to be. Without fear, without regret, without them. The more I painted, the more I realized that I wasn't running away anymore. I was moving forward. Sky Shade and Sunchild? They could watch, they could comment, they could send me as many cryptic, nostalgic messages as they wanted. But I wasn't coming back. I wasn't a character in their drama anymore. I was the artist, and this was my story. Act 3. A life reclaimed. Just when I thought I was finally untangled from the mess of my past, Donovan and Ethan showed up at my doorstep like the very bad sequel to a movie I didn't even want to watch. The kind where you know the plot twists are coming but can't turn off the TV, because you're already too invested. Or in my case, too annoyed. Donovan stood there with that sheepish look on his face, the one that made me want to either roll my eyes or strangle him with the bouquet he was holding. Honestly, I wasn't sure which would feel more satisfying. The flowers, by the way, were definitely not fresh enough for this moment. They had that sad, droopy vibe, like they'd already lived their best life at someone else's apology party. And I wasn't buying it. I made a mistake, Serena, he said, shifting on his feet like he was waiting for some grand revelation to burst from the sky. I want to fix this. I want us to be us again. Whoa, sweetie. If only us had ever been a real thing. I took a long dramatic pause, because I deserved that moment, after everything. I needed him to hear it. Oh, you're so sweet. But no, I said. And I swear I heard a little part of my heart release its grip on all the past hurt. I deserve to be loved, not tolerated. There it was. The words that had been sitting on the tip of my tongue for years, finally coming out. It was like I'd been living in this constant loop of self-doubt, and now, in one line, I was free. And the best part, I meant it. There was no part of me that wanted to go back. No. But he was my first love. Or maybe he's changed, or I should try harder. Hanging in the air. It was over. And I was moving on. Donovan didn't get it, of course. He blinked at me like he was trying to process the fact that I wasn't just being dramatic. I was serious. But there was no grand apology coming from him. No fireworks. Just more of the same. And as if on cue, Ethan stood there, the silent observer in the background. At first, he was quiet, just watching as his father tried, and failed to convince me that this time would be different. But there was something about watching it all unfold that made me realize Ethan wasn't the little boy I had left behind. Ethan was changing. A few weeks later, during one of his school breaks, he stayed with me. I couldn't shake the feeling that things were shifting. And it wasn't just my freedom, it was Ethan's view of the world around him. He was no longer the child who had mimicked Donovan's dismissive attitude toward me. Slowly, but surely, he started seeing things from my side. Things I had no idea he was even aware of. One evening, Donovan was sulking in the corner like a sad puppy, his eyes flicking between me and the empty space where his sense of entitlement once lived. Ethan, watching him like a hawk, turned to face his father and in that rare, brave moment, spoke with a maturity I didn't expect. "Mom deserves better than this," he said. His voice was steady, unwavering. "She deserves a chance to be happy." My heart squeezed at those words, not because they were the truth I'd been desperately needing to hear from Donovan, but because it felt like I had finally raised Ethan in the way that counted. To understand what love truly was. To see that I was worth more than being treated like an afterthought. It was like a light bulb had gone off in his head. Ethan was growing up. He was starting to see the cracks in the foundation of the world Donovan had built for him. And now he understood that, just maybe, I wasn't the villain in the story. It was the exact shift I'd been waiting for. Not just for myself but for Ethan too. In that moment, I knew, I wasn't going to be the one to hold him back anymore. I wasn't going to let my past hurt affect how he moved forward in life. He could make his own choices. And I hoped, for his sake, they were better than the ones Donovan had made. As for Donovan? Well, he sulked. For a while. The poor guy looked like a puppy who had just lost his favorite chew toy, and didn't know how to act around me anymore. The apologies, the regrets, it was all too little, too late. I had learned the hard way that people don't change unless they want to. And Donovan, he was still stuck in the patterns he'd built over the years, still holding on to the remnants of a life we never had. And as much as I wanted to believe in some version of a happy ending, Donovan's story was already written. The more he tried to chase me, the more I pulled away, until finally, he faded from the picture. It wasn't immediate. He tried, of course. He tried to weave himself back into my life like some kind of overzealous character in a second-rate romance novel. But I wasn't buying it anymore. I wasn't the supporting character in his life anymore. I was the heroine in mine. A few years later, after still clinging to a life that was nothing more than a shadow of what he wished it could have been, Donovan passed away. It wasn't tragic, or poetic. It was just the inevitable end of a story that had been fading for so long. But Ethan was different. Ethan had learned. He had grown. And when he inherited his father's empire, I knew one thing for sure. Donovan might have left a legacy, but Ethan had a chance to build a better one. The lessons I had taught him, about kindness, love, and understanding, were things he would carry forward into the world. He was finally starting to see that a healthy life isn't built on guilt and manipulation. It's built on honesty, forgiveness, and letting go of things that no longer serve you. And that, I think, is the greatest gift I could have ever given him. As for me, well, I was moving forward, unburdened, ready to embrace the life I had finally reclaimed. Act 4, Flourishing in Freedom. It wasn't all sad though. You know what's better than being married to a selfish jerk? Falling in love with a kind, steady man who loves you for exactly who you are. And trust me, after everything, I had earned that kind of love. Enter Julian, my neighbor, a man with a ridiculously calming presence. He wasn't the type to swoop in and fix things. No, Julian was the kind of guy who simply existed by my side, steady and unwavering. He didn't try to change me, and I didn't have to pretend. We were both a little broken, but together, we were whole. It was like we found a quiet peace in each other's chaos. As time went on, Ethan, too, matured into a man I could finally be proud of. It wasn't easy for him, and I won't pretend it was some magical overnight transformation. But when Julian and I got married, Ethan was right there by my side. In fact, he was the one who walked me down the aisle, his arms steady around mine. And I'll never forget what he said to Julian, with all the sincerity a teenager can muster: treat her right. She's the best thing to happen to you. I can't even describe the lump in my throat when I heard those words. In that moment, I realized how far we had come, both of us. From the bitterness of my divorce to this, a new family, built on understanding and love. As for me, well, I was living my best life. I painted more than ever, poured my soul into my work, and even started teaching, guiding young artists toward the same freedom I had fought for. I'd created my own little world, one filled with peace and purpose, and surrounded by people who made it worth living. Julian encouraged me every step of the way, never once asking me to give up my dreams. He was my biggest supporter, and maybe that's why we were such a perfect match. Ethan, bless him, went even further than I could have imagined. He took everything his father had built, every ounce of that toxic empire, and turned it on its head. He dismantled it, piece by piece, and redirected it toward things that mattered: art education, programs for single mothers, causes that meant something to both of us. It was like he took the broken pieces of his father's world and rebuilt something beautiful from it. And I couldn't have been prouder of him for it. And me? Well, let's just say that overreacting was no longer part of my story. I wasn't some woman who had been dismissed and left behind. I wasn't someone who had to apologize for standing up for herself. I was an artist, a mother, a wife, someone who had found peace, and that peace was worth everything. Every stroke of paint on the canvas, every laugh with Julian, every new day I spent free from the weight of my past. It was mine, and I wasn't letting it go for anything. My life is more than just a past full of broken promises. It's a future filled with colors I never knew existed. And that, my friends, is something worth painting about. So, here's to new beginnings, second chances, and the freedom to create your own story. Because sometimes the best masterpieces aren't found on a canvas, they're found in the life you build after everything falls apart. And as for Donovan, I'm done painting him into my picture.